Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
I think with regard to these accusations of voter suppression, it's completely and totally false. All people have to do is show up to the polls, show their ID, and they get to vote.
Why does it disproportionately affect African American and minority voters, those who presumably would be voting for Stacey Abrams?
I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that that an organization that Stacey Abrams was associated with was doing a lot of the voter registration and get out the vote effort among those people to register them to vote, and there were a lot of mistakes on the vote forms, and so I think that, like I said, it ties into the whole idea of
pretty minor mistakes, though. I mean, stuff like not having a hyphen between a name or a minor misspelling. I mean, those are the sort of things that if I went to a polling place in my state,
in some cases,
wouldn't mean that I wouldn't be able to vote.
I understand, but in some cases there were people registered several times.
That did not happen.
But here's the problem. Let's talk about what happened before we got to this point. This is the Secretary of State that has purged 1.4 million voters off the list since 2012. And so the problem is that when we look at voter restriction laws that Republicans have introduced all across the country, they somehow disproportionately affect people of color. And so when you have 70% of the people are African Americans that are on this exact match list, you can't help but think that there was just some funny business going on. And so what happens is that at a time where you should be making it easier for people to register to vote, not harder, in Georgia, it's become harder for you to register to vote and not easier. And so what the Republicans here want us to believe is that, oh, look, we've registered all these new voters and we have this 21st century strategy where you are allowed to register to vote online. But when you have people who are struck off the list because of a hyphen, if they go by Thomas and they use the word Tom, or if they decided to re-register and they move but they did not change their driver license and doesn't match what's in the Social Security Administration, these are all sort of the voter suppression tactics.
Yes, they are. They're all voter suppression. And of course, you can never make a white woman from Georgia say so. I just don't care how hard you try. They will never. They're just going to say African Americans were too stupid. They were just too stupid. They couldn't fill out the forms. And Stacey Abrams, went out and registered people, and they were just too stupid to fill out the forms correctly. Meanwhile, you've got this all over the South. Okay, like I said, in Tennessee, which is this is the race between Brazen and Marsha Blackburn for the Senate seat that Corker is leaving, okay? And this is neck and neck. And by the way, Tennessee, it's your neck. It's your neck. But they confiscated 250,000 driver's licenses from people who couldn't pay a parking ticket or even a moving violation. They couldn't pay. And so they took away your driver's license. They suspended it. And by the way, you need your driver's license to match, and it needs to be, it needs to be current, and it needs to be not expired, and it needs to be, in force. So if you want to vote. So last month, a federal judge said that Tennessee needs to stop revoking the licenses of people who, couldn't pay a traffic ticket and give them back their licenses. But the state appealed the decision. And so nothing's been fixed before the election. And then you've got the college students in Tennessee. It is not permissible to mail in your ballot in Tennessee unless you register to vote in person before an election commission official or you voted in a previous election. Well, 18-year-olds and, all the way up to, 22 maybe didn't vote in the last election. And they are in the middle of a school term. So how do they go and register? You know what I mean? The rules about voting by mail in Tennessee are so complicated that the campaign staff of a United States representative, Jim Cooper, created a graphic to help explain it. I can't even make heads or tails out of that graphic. It's too complicated. Shelby County is the largest county in Tennessee. It is also where African Americans are a majority. And last month, the Memphis branch of the NAACP and the Tennessee Black Voter Project and Shelby County's Election Commission were in a lawsuit because there were more than 10,000 voter registration applications that they just refused to process. They just took them and just set them aside. Again, pending. The election officials said the same thing. They're too stupid to fill out the forms properly. And this was because this was the case of Mr. or Ms. or Mrs. was left blank. I never use either of those prefixes, okay? I don't have a title. I don't use a title, okay? It's just my first name and a bunch of other names because my driver's license still has my maiden name, my married name, my bank account's got my it's got my maiden name, my married name, and Rhodes. A court in Chancery ordered the commission to allow citizens to complete the forms and vote on Election Day. How many people who haven't got confirmation know that if they just show up, they can vote? But check this out in Tennessee. The only thing that you'll get is a provisional ballot to be counted later. And there's no backup paper ballots in Tennessee at all. So if there's some sort of a breach or a hack or some sort of audit that's needed, because it'll be very close between Marsha and Phil Bresden, you can't do a recount. You can't. There is no backup paper ballot in Tennessee. You want to know? The state of Tennessee has had $28 million left over from federal funds that were provided to them after the Hanging Chad debacle here in Florida to put paper ballots, and they've never done it. These funds are only for improving the election system, and Tennessee, since 2000, for 18 years, has been sitting on that money year after year, refusing to update the voter systems in Tennessee, even though there's $28 million of federal money that was given to Tennessee to do exactly that. And of course, the most burdensome is the state-issued photo ID itself. You know, to get a state-issued photo ID in Tennessee, you need 2 proofs of residence, 2 proofs of identity, plus a social security card, and proof of citizenship and lawful residence. Tennessee is ranked 48th in the nation for ease of voting. The only 2 states that beat them in making it hard to vote is Mississippi and good old Virginia. And why is that? Because Republicans are in charge of voting. Tennessee, your governor, both your senators are Republican. Your state congressional delegation is made up of 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats. The entire state, except for 2 lonely little blue districts, Nashville and Memphis, are, and you got Steve Cohen. He's a great House member. But otherwise, Republicans hold all the power. They have supermajorities in both houses of the General Assembly. So if something goes wrong with your election, blame the Republicans. Stop blaming Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Stop blaming anybody in Tennessee. Stop blaming anybody in Texas for those old machines that the election integrity people have been warning your state about since 2006. That's why it matters. State legislatures, governorships, they all matter. Every last bit of it matters. This is just crazy. This is just nuts. And we know there's going to be a contested election in Georgia.
Joy, I don't have to tell you this. It's going to be a close race. It already is a close race. There's a decimal point percentage between the 2 candidates right now. It's very likely to go off to a runoff on Tuesday if one does not win 50+1%. And as you know, it's a bit of a cloud of controversy because Brian Kemp is the one who would be in charge of a recount if there was a recount, as he is the AG of this state. So, Joy, we're going to be here through Tuesday.
Ugh. Georgia's going to be a complete mess. Yeah, Brian Kemp is going to lord over his own recount. I mean, he's presiding over his own election. It's just so sick. And the same in Kansas. Chris Kobach is presiding over his own election. Tennessee is being presided over by an entire system of Republicans. They have disenfranchised at least 250,000 Tennesseans. North Dakota, they have disenfranchised anybody who has a P.O. box. Like I said, Texas is flipping votes if you're voting a straight ticket. North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp is on the ballot, and if you have a P.O. box, you can't vote for her. This is just insane what goes on, and America just sits there and goes, "We have free and fair elections, and the people will decide," and but. Obviously, young people are energized. There's been a lot of talk about young people not showing up to vote. Not true. Not true. Harvard did a study, and 40% of kids 18 to 29, 40% of them are definitely voting. They are voting. You know why? They're tired of being shot at. They're tired of watching their friends die. They're also tired of being debt-laden after they graduate college with only a minimum wage job in their future. They get that things are wrong here. And they're also tired of the hate and the racism because this generation of 18 to 29-year-olds are not racist. They don't have issues with LGBT. They don't have issues with hatred. They don't have issues with African Americans. They don't have issues with Asian friends or Jewish friends or whatever it is. And they're sick of it. They're sick of that being the get out the vote tactic that the Republicans deploy year after year after year after year. They're not stupid. They look it up. They've seen what Lee Atwater's commercials look like. They know who Jesse Helms is. They know the Hands commercial. They know that this commercial that Trump put up that ran during the football game yesterday, that is disgusting. They know that man came into the country when Bill Clinton was president and was deported when Bill Clinton was president. And he was kept out of the country until George Bush was president. And that's when he snuck back in. And they know that man is a killer. And that he is crazy. And that he is not representative of an immigrant community because they are some of the safest communities that we have. They also know that their immigrant neighbors pay taxes, and they pay billions and billions of dollars in every kind of tax you could possibly imagine. They pay into Social Security, something they will never benefit from. Billions of dollars into Social Security. They pay state tax. They pay local tax. They pay sales tax. They support this economy in genuinely important ways. There is no question that the effect on our economy that immigration has is a positive one.
Two of the president's favorite topics, immigration and the economy. They are much more intertwined than many people may realize. Before taking office, the president and his economic team talked about getting the country's gross domestic product growth to 4%. He actually said 5% and 6% as well. So this is something it hasn't done since the 2000s. But there is a key ingredient to hitting and sustaining high GDP growth, and that is workers, labor force. The president's team celebrated when the June's job report came out, where we found out that there were more open jobs, 6.7 million of them, than people available to fill them, 6.4 million. But it could be very well an indicator that this administration needs to expand immigration into the United States rather than limit it. In the year 2000, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, touted the news of the U.S. meeting the replacement rate for the first time since 1971. That's the number of births per year for a generation that is needed to replicate its numbers, keep the labor force up. Like in many developed countries, people have fewer children, so maintaining or growing the population is an economic imperative that requires steady, or even in America's case, increased rates of immigration. Since hitting that replacement rate in 2000, the fertility rate has bumped up a little bit. This is births per thousand, by the way. Take a look at this. Look at where we've gone here. It's bumped up a little bit, but it started a steady decline about a decade ago. We are simply having fewer babies. As older Americans retire, the number of workers per Social Security beneficiary is also on the downturn, meaning we're going to need more immigrants to fill jobs, sustain the economy, and contribute to your retirement if you'd like that to happen. But a new rule proposed by this administration could put a chill on immigration. The Department of Homeland Security proposed creating new criteria that would disqualify immigrants from getting a green card if they were likely to use government-subsidized medical care, housing, and food benefit programs, even for a short time. This is all part of an anti-immigration calculus. The belief is that immigrants come into America and suck up our social services that are paid for by real Americans. But other than the fact that legal immigrants pay into these systems, analysis done by the Libertarian Cato Institute found that while immigrants tend to use SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, the food stamps, if you will, and Medicaid at slightly higher rates than native-born Americans, their use of other programs are either on level with or far below native-born use. And another study by the Cato Institute found that immigrants have a nearly net zero impact on government budgets. There's actually a net positive benefit on revenue to all levels of government, according to a 2012 study by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. This is just scratching the surface on this. The idea that there are too many immigrants in America or that immigration is a danger economically to America is patently false.
It is. It's patently false. I spent the better part of yesterday and this morning tweeting Cult 45 members the actual numbers that clearly show that immigrants pay billions into Social Security without any chance of ever getting that benefit. And I'm talking undocumented. So people don't, well, how do you know who pays what? Because they don't have a Social Security number, so how do they pay tax? It's called an individual tax ID number. And undocumented. He's talking about documented immigrants using SNAP and, Medicaid. Even documented immigrants use those things at a much lower rate than native-born Americans use those things. However, undocumented immigrants pay in billions of dollars using individual tax ID numbers, but only about half of them do. Now, if you gave them work permits, the other half would too, and you'd have billions more supporting Social Security. And you listen to the right wing's solution, raise the retirement age. Oh, F you. What am I supposed to work till I'm 80 now? Give me a freaking... Yeah, let me tell you a little secret. At 60, it all falls apart, okay? You're going to have something. Something that's going to hurt you, something that's going to pain you, something that's going to keep you from breathing, something that's going to keep your heart rate going. You're going to need to retire, and you're going to need medical care, and it's going to be called a pre-existing condition. So what you want to do is get more people paying into Social Security. It's the exact opposite plan that Trump has for you. The other thing is you stop paying into Social Security at $128,000. Why is that? Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.